Despite its importance as one of the longest running shows on the BBC, and its role in the Guinness World of Records as the longest running science fiction ongoing series, which crosses both book, television and audio formats, there are almost 100 missing episodes of Doctor Who that were produced, filmed, recorded and then wiped from the archives in the 1960s. Now the BBC has done a lot of efforts to try and recover some of these missing episodes. And I say the BBC, largely this has been down to fan aficionados taking it upon themselves, and thanks to their efforts we have recovered audio of all of the missing stories. And we have screenshots and telesnaps and partial clips of footage from several of other episodes. But there are just under 100 episodes still completely missing from the BBC archive, meaning, unfortunately for fans of the show, we can't go back and rediscover them. But what if we can? What if there was a way to recover some of these missing episodes? They've been located all around the world. Some of them have been recovered from skips, some of them from building sites, some of them from warehouses in the furthest corners of the world where they were sent for distribution and then lost, presumed forgotten forever. Well, there are ways of recovering these lost things. If you look hard enough, there are lots of ways out there to try and do what you can. Well, there's no doubt this is the place. We got a tip off that there's something interesting here. So the builders found it and they've left it ready for me to uncover. They said that they'd leave the front door undocked, but there was no power inside. So in we go. Right. Signs of the building work still ongoing. They've left at least one charging pack in place. Here we go. Just around the corner, they said. Follow the plastic strip. And behind the curtain. Okay, what do we have here? Lots of stuff going on. And a hole in the wall. Up the steps, I think. Careful. Don't want to put my foot through that. Looks to be some kind of loft conversion. Could have been anything hidden up here before they came to dig it out. Yeah. There we are, there's the rest of the house. So, they said they'd leave it up here for me. Somewhere I could find it. I think I've spotted it. Is that it? Yes, indeed. Next to the workman's lunch, one pristine copy of Evil of the Daleks. Bingo. For a while now, the BBC has been commissioning studios to reanimate some of the stories which are lost. They started with some stories where there was just one episode out of 4 or 6 missing, so there was only a small portion to animate. But a couple of years ago, they released Power of the Daleks, the very first Patrick Troughton, that's the second Doctor story. It was the first release that was completely animated from start to finish. There were no surviving episodes. They've done a few more stories since then, and with each release the animation has largely improved. There have apparently been some backward steps, but I haven't seen any of these since Power of the Daleks. I was largely impressed at the time, but it was okay for a story where most of the story was there was one episode missing, but Power of the Daleks never quite grabbed me, and that was also tied in with the BBC Store debacle, where I downloaded and watched through there before the BBC shuts down the BBC Store and I got a full refund. So at least I watched the Power of the Daleks effectively for free. I haven't purchased an animated story since then, so Evil of the Daleks seemed to be the perfect opportunity to jump back in. And it's interesting, this Blu Ray is released in 2 formats. There's the traditional square letterbox black and white version of the story, which is supposed to be as authentic as possible, and then there's a colour animated widescreen version of the story, and I've checked both out, and I'm reasonably impressed with the quality of the animation. This is a really fun story. The set design is quite simple. There is only really 3 settings. There's the 1960s in the first episode. Then the majority of the following episodes are set in and around a Victorian townhouse, a country estate, before the final episode finally takes us to the Dalek home planet of Skaro. And that is probably, the final episode is the reason so many fans wanted this story to be recovered. It's always had something of a significant place in Doctor Who history. This was supposed to be the final ever Dalek story before Terry Nation took the rights to his creation and planned to head to America to produce film movies and essentially build this as an independent franchise away from the Doctor Who mythos. That never quite happened. But it was still a really exciting cutting off point. It would be several years before they would make a triumphant return. So this chance to see Skaro, to meet for the first time the Dalek Emperor, a character who we wouldn't see again until Chris Eccleston and Russell T Davies brought the television show back many, many decades later. This final end of the Daleks was really a cornerstone of missing Doctor Who. It's great to see it brought back, but the story isn't really about that. That's just the final episode, and it's a really good final episode, and the Daleks are definitely the best thing about the animation. They seem to be computer modelled, they move around pretty realistically, there's some good lighting and shadow effects there. Regarding the Daleks, I am nothing but impressed with this release. It's the characters, however, and all of the preceding episodes which make the animation sort of stand out. I'm largely impressed. The Doctor and Jamie McCrimmon are quite expressive. There's not too many secondary characters, so a lot of thought and attention seems to have gone into them. My main concern is Maxtable's facial hair, which, yes, it would have been a lot of effort to try and animate it. I think it's particularly he has these two fronds sticking out to the side of his face, these curls, which you can even see when he's walking away from the camera. You just see these curls sticking outside of his. I'm sure that's realistic to what he actually looked like in the actor in person. In the animation terms, it just looks a little bit bizarre. But they move expressively, they're well matched to the audio. This is a pretty well animated release, and in the middle of the story there are actually some action scenes between Jamie and Campbell having a fight. It's not perfect. Definitely when you compare it to the likes of the latest big animated series I've seen is Disney's What If, which has some fantastic fight sequences. Largely the animation style used in What If works well for the fight sequences and looks a little bit jarring for everything else. You have the inverse here. This looks really good for characters standing around and talking, a little bit stilted when you come to the fight scenes. But it suits the story, and what a story this is. So, if you've never watched Evil of the Daleks, it goes a little bit like this. In the very first episode, the Doctor and Jamie are hunting down the missing TARDIS. It's just been stolen, and the entirety of that first episode is essentially the two of them trying to track down who has taken it and figure out why. At the end of that story, they find out who's taken it, and they discover a plot intrigue about someone moving goods through time from the 1960s to modern, at the time, 1960s Britain. They proceed back into history to follow the TARDIS to uncover this plot, which is where they uncover the Daleks. And the story does that thing. The story is called Evil of the Daleks. The moment you turn it on, it's one of the first things you see on the title screen. It is 7 episodes long. And so, when shall we introduce the Daleks? There will be a cliffhanger at the end of the first episode, 1/7 of the way through the story, and the cliffhanger will be a Dalek appears. It doesn't even kill anyone at that moment. It does moments into the second episode, but the first episode ends with the shocking revelation that there are Daleks behind this plot. Which, if you've read the title of the episode, if you didn't tune in 5 minutes late, or read the briefing on the television guide listings, is not really much of a shock at all. The cliffhangers seem to be a consistent problem with the episodes. There is a point, I can't remember if it was the end of the second or the third episode, that shook me a little bit, really taking out the story. Again, cliffhangers are meant to be shocking, they're meant to pull you in. There is a point where the Daleks are talking amongst themselves and they say, if these people do not obey us, then they will die. And then another Dalek goes, they will not disobey us. Cue end of the cliffhanger. Sorry, the plot twist here, the shocking revelation that is going to make you come back next week is that the Daleks are not going to need to kill anyone. Yes, I am hooked. Okay, I'm being glib. These cliffhangers, they are not perfect. There are some good ones towards the end of the story, but you don't watch this for the cliffhangers. If it's on a Blu Ray, you'll come back and watch it as a complete serial with these different installments. And it's a pretty nice story. Despite being 7 episodes long, it has distinct phases that make it never seem to outstay its welcome. That very first phase in the 1960s only lasts the first episode and a half. Then the Victorian townhouse has several revelations that move the story forward. You have Jamie's plot and what he is attempting to do, the Doctor's manipulation, what the Daleks are asking him to do, and then the confrontation as they move back to Skaro for the Dalek master plan to be finally unveiled. There's a really nice progression here in the story. It does not ever feel like it's just moving in circles. The subplot regarding the secondary human characters could have been fleshed out a little bit more. Definitely Ruth Maxtable is pretty much wasted, and her fiance, there was a really good attempt at something here, but it doesn't ever quite pan out the way you think retrospectively it should have, but it's fine in the moment, it's providing intrigue. Victoria Waterfield, who would go on to become an important companion for the Doctor in the coming stories, this doesn't really serve as much of an introduction to her. You learn about her through her family, you learn about her through her father's begging about saving her life, but she doesn't do very much save a little bit of resistance to the Daleks. So it's not much resistance at all. A little bit too much screaming, a little bit too much passive. She would be much better served in the episodes that followed that actually allow her to flesh out in her own right, rather than seeing who through her farmer's and Jamie's eyes. And Jamie just instantly seeing a portrait of her mother and going, oh, she's beautiful. Yet you can tell this is made and written in the 1960s. It's a little bit dated there. So, ignoring all of that, the story that is here is really well paced, with the one proviso that you have to overlook the simple foolishness of the entire concept. The idea here is that the Daleks wish to discover the human factor. They want to understand what it is that makes humans unique, that makes humans behave the way they do. It's about a scientific experimental trial. This is a really nice idea. It plays upon the ideas of Daleks as master manipulators. As someone who don't just... because they would win if they just appeared and exterminated the Doctor the moment they saw him. And the show is continuously trying to come up with excuses and reasons why that doesn't happen. It makes sense here. Their plan makes complete sense. What doesn't make sense is the method of their scientific investigation, which essentially boils down to you can sum up the entirety of the human condition by putting one man in a haunted house and watching him walk around it. If you overlook that one tiny inconsistency, that one stupid central concept, everything else that follows is brilliant. Patrick Troughton is clearly having the time of his life as he manipulates Jamie into doing his bidding, as he then battles with the Daleks, and his glee as he gets his final victory, as he works his personal plan against theirs, makes... I wish we could have seen this for real. But the animated version, it's a nice one. I'm glad I bought this. I'm glad I picked it up. I'm going to go back and find some more of the animated stories that I've missed in the meantime. There's a wealth of joy in some of the missing 1960s Doctor Who episodes. There's a wealth of fluff as well. It's not all gold, but this is definitely one of the better ones. So, would I recommend Evil of the Daleks to anyone? Definitely. It's got a lot to say about the human condition, and it's got a lot to say about the Dalek condition. This is one of the better final confrontations between the Metal Pepper Pots and their time-travelling nemesis.